Hello, everybody. In the movie Keeping the Faith, there is a scene where this rabbi is sitting with this kid, and this kid is going through his bar mitzvah, and he's trying to sing the blessing, and his voice sounds absolutely terrible. I don't know whether you've actually seen the movie, but he sounds awful. Anyway, the rabbi eventually stops it, and he says, what's going on? And the guy says, his voice is cracking. And he said, I suck. I so suck. And you know what the rabbi says to him? You've got to love that you suck. You've got to embrace the suck. And that's what I'm talking about today. Embracing the sucky changes in our lives can often lead to new roads, new pathways, all sorts of new things opening. So I want you to come with me on a little journey, and I'm just going to share with you 3 points today on some sucky moments in my own life and things that I've learned. And I hope that you can relate to some of them. Some of you may not, but all of us here have sucky things happen to us. The first thing I want to talk about is when the suck embraces you rather than you embracing it. In 1996, I had and then lost my firstborn child. She was a daughter called Lavender, and she was gorgeous. At the time, obviously, I was devastated. On the coroner's report, it read that forceps were used for too long and too hard. In fact, they had 2 of them stuck inside of me, and it was awful. 2 days after I lost her, I had 2 of the doctors from the hospital standing at the end of my bed telling me not to sue the hospital. To be honest, it was the last thing on my mind. After this really sucky thing happened, I did what a lot of people do when really bad things happen. I hid. I remember waking up in the morning and just wishing I'd go to sleep again. And I'm sure there's people here today, you've had a diagnosis of cancer, you've lost someone who's so close to you, you've had a really messy relationship bust up, maybe you've failed your exams at uni, something terrible like that has happened, and you just want to hide. You just want the world to stop and you just want to stay under the covers and hide. And that's what I did. I had people knocking on my door and I just refused to open. But eventually I thought, man, this has happened, but if I let this suck keep embracing me, I'm not going to go anywhere. So this is what I did. I joined a support group of other people who had lost children, and it was amazing. The second thing I did was surround myself with good people, people that told me that, just have another baby and everything will be okay. And I also allowed myself to grieve. Some days I was a blubbering mess on the floor, and you know what? That's fine. Even now, sometimes I'll go to a place and I see something and it reminds me of her and I get a little pang inside of me. The grieving doesn't stop, it just changes. But out of this terrible thing, my then husband and I went to Kenya, as he was from Kenya, towards the end of that really sucky year. And we bought this land and we started this project where we opened a couple of schools, women's groups. Eventually it grew into quite a big thing. And we named the project Lavender Springs. And every time I walked on that property and saw the kids and other people that were affected by it, I just remembered my daughter and the legacy she was leaving. Point number 2, accept the suck. I was travelling on a bus, sort of like our Greyhound buses here in Australia. It was a massive big one, and we were going from Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, to a place called Kitale, which is about 400 kilometres to the west. And this bus had lots of people, and it would take all day because the roads were pretty bad, and so you'd leave in the morning and you'd reach there at night time. Anyway, about an hour into this bus trip, I started to get these pangs in my stomach. Who here has had food poisoning before? Okay, guys, you're going to know exactly what's going to happen next. Here we are, in the middle of nowhere. No lose, nothing. And my body told me I needed one badly. So, raced up to the bus driver, he pulled over, thank goodness, got off, went behind a tree, did my thing, got back on the bus thinking, thank God that's over. Well, no, it wasn't over. It happened again and again and again. The last time it happened, we were in this completely flat grass area. And by this stage, it was coming out both ends. Who knew so much crap could be inside of one person? So there I was in all my glory. I'm a pants-wearing girl, so I had jeans on and squatting in front of the tyre bus, must have been like movie time for everyone, as they were looking on me as my bare bum is there in the grass and I'm squatting away and it's coming out everywhere. It was a pretty embarrassing moment in my life, I can tell you, and thank goodness social media wasn't really around back in the late 90s. Otherwise, goodness knows what would have happened. But anyway, I had to get back on that bus. I had to accept the suck. There's probably people here today, you've had humiliating, embarrassing, terrible moments in your life. And the easiest thing to do sometimes is to hide from it. But sometimes we've got to just accept the suck and get back on the bus, because we ain't going nowhere unless we get back on that bus. And so that's what I had to do. Accepting the suck means moving. Sometimes you might go a few steps back and forwards, but you've just got to move. Okay, number 3, the last one, is face the suck. In 2007, my marriage was over. I had been in a pretty volatile relationship for about 15 years, and I left Australia with my 3 children and we boarded a plane and went back to Kenya, and I thought we were going to be living there at the project that we had started. But no, life has these funny twists and turns, and it took us on a new route. And at the time, my then husband wasn't involved in this project anymore, but he would come onto the project, and at one of those times he broke into where I was staying and attacked me. And then I started to get all these threatening text messages. And I had to make the decision, because at the time I thought, if I don't do something, I could be one of those women that ends up in a coffin flying back to Australia. So without anyone knowing, we had to keep it very quiet. My parents had flown in. We made plans to go back to Australia. My kids didn't even know. So we made all these plans without people knowing, like I said. And on the weekend before we were flying on the Thursday, I discovered that my daughter's passport had expired. So on the Monday, I made the mad dash to Nairobi, which was about 4 to 5 hours on the car, and I got to the embassy, rocked up to the counter and said, look, my daughter, we're flying on Thursday, I've got to get a passport. The lady said, fine, not a problem. You just got to fill in this form, you sign here, and your daughter's father has to sign here. And I said, I'm not seeing him, I'm not talking to him, is there anything that we can do? And she explained to me, she said, look, if there's only one signature on this application, we have to send it to London, and it could take up to 6 weeks to get back. Being the emotional person I am, I burst into tears, and she quickly grabbed a box of tissues and gave them to me, and then reaching inside her drawer, she drew out this piece of paper about that big, and she said, look, all you need to do is get him to sign here, and I can issue an emergency passport. So I left the embassy with a weight on my head, and I thought, okay, my 2 boys, they're excellent travellers. They love travelling, and they're here today. I thought they could fly out on Thursday by themselves. They're pretty competent. And me and my daughter would go into hiding for a few weeks. We might go to Uganda or Tanzania or do something like that until the passport comes. I was trying to think. Anyway, we got back to the project at night, and I walked into the room and the kids said, oh, look, Dad wants to meet us up the road. We're just going to go up and say hi. And on the off chance, I said, look, like his passport's expired, can you just get your dad to sign this piece of paper? Thinking, it's not going to happen. Anyway, they come back and the paper's signed. So in the space of 2 days, we pretty much packed up our entire life without the kids knowing, without anyone knowing, except a very trusted friend. And on the way to the airport, I told the kids, hey, guess what? We're flying back to Australia. And being the amazing kids they are, they took it all in their stride. I rang up my sister who lived in Melbourne at the time, and I said, guess what? We're flying back. She was in a shock. It was like, oh, can we come and crash for a couple of days? So we arrived back in a wintry July, Melbourne. We know what it's like here. And I forgot about that. So one of the first places we went to was the DFO and got a new pair of cons. Yay. So that wasn't too bad. But this was a tragic thing that had happened, and it was devastating. And I had to leave some very good friends and family without saying goodbye because we didn't want to put them in jeopardy. And eventually the project that we had built for over 10 years closed. And hundreds of kids were affected, many families, partners around the world I had to explain what had happened to. My dreams just crashed before me. And I felt an absolute failure. Anyone here today felt like that? An absolute failure. And I thought, what on earth can we do from here? But I had to face the suck. And one of the best things I did was book myself into a really good shrink. And I got my money's worth, believe me. And the next thing I did, I had some awesome friends who weren't tired of hearing my story. And I also faced up to some things using words like abuse and manipulation and control, words that I hadn't really thought of how my life had been. And I had to be honest with my family, friends, and those closest to me. And gosh, it was hard. It was hard. But I had to face the suck. Sorry, I'm a bit of an emotional person. But the next thing I did was I got a part-time job, which was very helpful. And I just started to do life. And in facing the suck, all these things started to come together. I ended up meeting I kind of knew him from before, this gorgeous human being who I married, became husband number 2. And no, I'm not going to do husband number 3. And together we started this organisation in Kenya called Tandem. And we partner with groups and communities and schools there. And one of the amazing groups that I met when I went back again was this inspiring women's group who'd started a support group because all of their children were born with disabilities and there's nothing there for them. And when I first met them, you could tell that poverty was a real issue. And most of these women were surviving day by day, doing all sorts of things to keep their families afloat. And we started off with a chicken project. And this project went so cool that eventually we partnered with them on a greenhouse. And last July, I'm sitting there with these women in front of the greenhouse. And we're telling stories and everything, and they're telling me these amazing stories of how now they're running businesses, now they're putting their kids through school, just story after story after story. And you know what? It really hit me. We would never have met, this group would never have started unless we embraced the suck. You know, embracing the suck can bring all sorts of amazing things out. Imagine if everyone in this room, imagine if the combined suckiness, and I'm sure there's a lot of suckiness in this room, imagine if the combined suckiness in this room, if we faced the suck, if we looked on it head on, if we took it on, if we embraced the suck, if we didn't run from it, if we squeezed every single thing out of it, just imagine what we could do. Guys, we could triumph. Embrace the suck. Thank you.